There are 4,218 PS2 games, and I'm beating every one of them. I've got to own the game because I'm playing everything on the original hardware, but I've beefed it up with a RetroTink 5X, some component cables, and more to come soon. Can I do this before I die of old age? I hope so. Klonoa 2 was developed by Namco and released in 2001, and is a direct sequel to the original Klonoa for PS1. While the game received favorable reviews, sales just didn't match, resulting in a canceled GameCube title and hampering later releases. It was still lauded as a great platformer, just a short one. Can I beat this unique 2D, 3D blended platformer? Klonoa 2 is a quirky little platformer whose graphics feel like they haven't aged a day, mostly because they're cel-shaded, and cel-shaded graphics usually look pretty good no matter when you look at them, which is nice. A lot of indie games nowadays have cel-shaded graphics, and they look fantastic. So let's go over the journey. The game opens with our titular character Klonoa, who is a hybrid animal of some sort with big floppy furry ears, which are the greatest part of him, of course. And he is in a dream, or what seems to be a dream, and he's being told to help someone, this weird silhouette, and afterwards, he floats off into the dream and suddenly appears in the water with an airship hovering above him. Two characters talk about trying to get him, but before they can, he's saved by two other characters. It's not worth it because they could lose the ring. We're not sure what that is yet, but when we get on shore, the other two characters, Lolo and Popka, tell us all about themselves. Lolo is a priestess in training, and Popka is Popka. The two characters in the airship take off. We tell them our name, Klonoa, and they say that is the name of the dream traveler. Of course, before it's explained, we get attacked by a monster, and gameplay begins. Klonoa 2 is a 2D side-scroller in a 3D environment, which makes things look really cool, and sometimes it's used to the advantage of the game, but most often it's just going to look really pretty and be cool overall. Generally, this game has very few things the character actually does to keep it simple, but also to add mechanics to the game through the enemies themselves and the environment, rather than making the player press extra buttons. The main things Klonoa can do is a jump with a hover, and the hover reminds me of Yoshi's little kick at the end of his jump, where he kicks his legs to get just that extra distance. If you press X and then hold X after you've pressed it, you'll hover with your ears for a second, allowing you to get just a little further after your jump. Pressing square will allow you to throw the ring out a small distance, and whatever direction you press, you will throw the ring. The difference here being that if you press up or down, you actually might shoot the ring into the 3D environment away from the screen or towards the screen, meaning that they can put enemies back further and out of the way for you to miss by jumping and touching, but being able to be grabbed by the ring, which is really cool. Once you've grabbed an enemy with your ring, this is where all the mechanics come in for each of the enemies. Most enemies can be used as a double jump. If you have one on your ring and you jump, you can perform a second jump as just a normal double jump with a hover still at the end of it, but it allows you to get much higher. And this is a way for the game to get you to do some cool platforming sections by giving you an enemy and allowing you to double jump over to new places. It's also included in all of the puzzles. Some enemies, when you grab them, will allow you to fly around. Some will explode with different kinds of properties, like one that counts down a timer and one that will grab other enemies. You've got a lot of cool things to look forward to, so each enemy you want to grab and throw to see what they do. Klonoa has 3 hearts at the top of the screen that denotes his health. Each time you lose one, of course, it gets you closer to death, and you can pick up hearts in the environment to either heal 1 heart or full hearts. You also have a counter at the top right that are just little dream stones. Every time you collect 100 of them, you get an extra life to use in levels. However, it's never really that important for me. I lose very few lives, and when I do, most of the time I'm fine. It's really not that hard to get extra lives, but it also doesn't feel like you're punished that badly for dying anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it too much, unless of course you want to get 100% of the game done. You can also collect special hidden dolls throughout the game, although I don't really ever get them myself, but they are there. You can find some eggs in the environment that will contain some really useful items, as well as a clock that will be your checkpoint system. If you die, you'll land back at the clock. You'll find 1-up coins, which just give you a free life if you find it. You'll find keys, although you'll use those on doors in each of the levels, so it won't stay with you. You'll also find mirror spirits that will double the amount of dream stones you require, so, you know, if you want to get some extra lives and you want to get some dream stones, you get one of these spirits and you get some extra dream stones. Okay, we can finally move on about talking about the actual game, and I'm going to tell you what, each of the levels is pretty much just full of a couple puzzles each that get increasingly more difficult, so I'm going to talk about each of the levels very sparingly, since a lot of it's just running, grabbing enemies, jumping off of them until you get to the next puzzle. But this first area is much like a tutorial. Most of it's just grabbing an enemy and throwing him at another, or grabbing him and double jumping. So I travel around, hitting some enemies, collecting some stones, until eventually we get to this old bell, and we're told to ring it, because it's important to ring. Lolo says that she can become a full-fledged priestess now that she's rung the bell, but I think she believes that since Klonoa did it, maybe she doesn't deserve it, because then we go meet this guy named Baguji, and he talks to us about the bells. He says that there are 4 bells scattered around the kingdom that are supposed to protect everyone. Something about ringing them and grabbing the elements that come from those bells, because there is a 5th bell. One to rule them all? No, just a bell in the darkness that's supposed to be causing chaos, and no one sees it coming. But there's monsters everywhere, they're running amok, and so that 5th bell must be the reason, right? Well, he says go see the High Priestess to figure out what's actually going on. I go through a couple more areas that are beautifully detailed, by the way, but I also get to see something else. Klonoa 2 sometimes uses the Mega Man method of teaching you what's about to happen, by having it happen in front of you once and then throwing you into it the next time. So you watch an enemy run away from you. You can't catch up to it, you just can't. And it runs up to a hole in the wall where a monster comes out and eats it. If you walk past it after it's eaten a monster and is chewing on it, then you're safe. So the whole idea is, now that you've seen what happens, if you pick up an enemy and throw him at the hole, the monster will come out to eat him, get busy, and leave you alone. I think it's one of the best methods to teach someone how to play your game. Honestly, it was very easy for me to see and understand. I got it right away. There was no questions. I just learned from it and moved on. We make it to the High Priestess, and she tells us pretty much the same thing. We need to go to each of the bells, get the elements from them, and those elements will help protect us from evil. She makes Lolo an honorary priestess, which kind of is weird for Lolo. She just really wants to be a regular priestess, but I think she's having issues becoming one. But she makes her one and says to go with Klonoa and help him get the first bell in the Kingdom of Tranquility, which is the closest. Okay, so when she said it's close, it was really close. We head over to the bells since we're already in the Kingdom of Tranquility, and we fight our first boss. It's Leorna, the Sky Pirate. Her and her cat were the ones hovering above us when we were in the water at the beginning of game, and now she's here to stop us from taking the elements from the bells. So she has us do this little boss fight with this kind of dragon ship. It's got 2 phases, it's very easy. You grab enemies while you're running around this circle, and you throw them at the ship in the middle, and you hit it kind of right in its like little butthole. It's got its little glowy butthole, but you hit it, and the 2 phases are practically the same. It spins in a circle, you grab enemies, you jump over stuff, and you throw it at it. After the battle, Leorna thinks we're really cool, and we grab the element from the bell, and we hear the dream voice once again. It says, help me. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I can't help you. I don't know who you are or where you are. We head back over to Baguji, who tells us to go to the next bell, but he also ruminates about why Leorna wants to fight us. While she is a sky pirate who is looking for treasure, she also wants our ring, which is weird because the only way to wield the ring is to have a priestess power it up. That's why I'm able to use the ring here. Lolo uses her powers to power it up for me. But how would the sky pirate do anything with it if she doesn't have a priestess? I mean, what priestess would want to work with her? She's a pirate. So they all go, whatever. It's reassuring to know that she probably won't be able to use it. So let's just move on to the Kingdom of Joyland, which is literally an amusement park. The entire kingdom is made of an amusement park. But the second we get there, Leorna's cat steals the first element from us, and not only steals it, but splits into 2 different cats, and then one of them takes it. It says, hey, try and figure out who has it. Now you have 2 choices. My choice is to do the Black Cats level, which is a boarding level, and this is actually really well done. There's several of these kinds of levels. There's even a boss battle on a board, and they work just fine. All of the regular mechanics of the game are still there. You can grab enemies and use them to double jump. You can glide around on your board, dodging things, picking up dream stones, hearts, everything. Everything's still here. The whole idea on this level is to not hit anything and get hurt, because the further you make it without getting hurt, the closer you get to the cat. It's kind of like a closed course. Every so often you'll loop back around until you get hit the fewest times and reach the cat. Of course, this cat does not have the stone, so we have to move on to the next level. We go to the next level where we chase the white cat around the amusement park, fighting it at various times like a little mini boss, and also using enemies to hit some crystals to open a door. Part of this level also takes place on a haunted section of the amusement park, and Lolo is scared, so the ring is shaking, and Klonoa is trying to convince her it's fine, it's all fake. Eventually we do catch the white cat, and we get our element from the bell back, so it wasn't lost forever. Too bad we're attacked by our next boss, who conceals himself inside of this big cylinder full of spikes that like drill into you. The idea is that it will land on the ground and try and hit you with the spikes. You throw an enemy at it, and it will roll on its side and roll around the circle. You try and match speed with it, grab an enemy, and throw an enemy at it from the other side of the circle where the opening of the cylinder is. That will deal the damage. You do this a few times and the boss is over. It's a much shorter boss fight this time. And I really do like how they use the 3D element of this game. It's so cool. I love this this game. However, when Leorna confronts us about the boss battle, she isn't upset that we killed the boss. In fact, she says, "That's enough data." And Klonoa says, "What data?" Well, Leorna is gathering data on us for some reason, and so she's gone, hopefully not using it for her evil ways, but she probably is. So we ring the next bell, and we now have 2 elements. And we head back to Beguji, who will tell us that the next kingdom is a warring kingdom, Volk. They're like constantly fighting or something, and that we gotta go to that bell too, because, well, we need all the elements from each of the bells. And the only way to do this is to go underground, since we don't want to be part of the war going on up above ground. But before we begin, as we start to go underground, we see Leorna in a lab working on a copy of the ring. But we thought she couldn't use it because she doesn't have a priestess. Well, this is weird. But we decide, since we know that the reactors of this machine making the copy of the ring can explode, we decide to not fight them head on. We were going to make the reactors explode ourselves so the copy gets destroyed. Over the next couple levels, we get introduced to a new enemy that explodes after you pick him up, and you can use them to either hit other enemies or these special diamond balls that will block your way. We also get to ride some enemies up through some holes in some roofs and fly out into the city, which is on fire and being destroyed, and there's fighting going on, and we get to fly around this area, which is really cool. I don't know, just set pieces are really nice in this game. We eventually reach a guard bot for the Vulcan army, and he's a big octopus thing that jumps around the level, and you've got to jump over the top of his head and do a double jump off of an enemy. When you do a double jump, it sends them straight down. You can use this in puzzles, but it's also in this boss fight where you hit the top of his head where there's like this propeller leading into his body. You do this several times until his phase 2, where he begins to jump around the level with wheels and missiles and everything, and it's actually kind of difficult because you've got to really aim those double jumps over his head. He will jump over the top of the jump pads you're using as well, which kind of makes it difficult. I died once because he just slams himself into you. You've really got to time your double jumps well. After we beat him, Leorna thanks us for destroying the reactor. It's exactly what she wanted. Now she's holding on to her copy of our ring. But don't worry, she's not a priestess. There's no way she can, holy crap, she just rang the bell and took one of the elements for herself. We're screwed, aren't we? Lolo is obviously really upset, and we are kind of confused. How could she do this without a priestess? The sad part is we still have to escape. And while we're escaping and trying to get to the last reactor to actually get out of this place, we get chased by a bot the entire time. We do go into some areas where we meet a new enemy that lets us do a double jump that is electrified. We can use him to smash upwards through things by sending Klonoa flying and electrified, which is really cool. There's some puzzles that deal with this. And then we come back to the bot who is chasing us yet again. He doesn't end up stopping chasing us until we get to the last reactor and deactivate it, and then we escape the city of Volk and we get back to Beguji. He says, well, Leorna is still gonna go for the next bell, so you should probably go there to stop her. And we have to go to Mira Mira, which is a xenophobic land and they don't like anyone coming there. But a long time ago, when all of the kingdoms were nice to each other, you could go wherever you wanted. So doing this stuff is really gonna help bring the kingdoms back together. So that's really the whole point of this thing. But the question is now, how do we get over there then? Well, he says there's an arc, pretty much a flying ship, that used to go around and take people between kingdoms. Maybe if we can get that arc working, we can get to Mira Mira. Lolo is also a little upset. You see, Leorna is actually trying to save the world. Even though she's acting mean towards us, she's actually trying to be the one who saves the world. That's why she made a copy of the ring. I thought at first it was because she was bad, but I think she just wants to be the one to save the world. But Lolo also wants to be the one to save the world. So she says, yeah, she can't do it. We are the ones who are gonna save the world. And even Popka's like, that doesn't sound right. I think she's just upset that she is the only person who was having trouble becoming a priestess. So she does not want to lose this chance of showing everyone how priestess-like she can be. Obviously, she doesn't want Leorna to take the spotlight, and she has a little bit to learn about herself, right? Well, the next area we go to is to activate the arc. We have to activate 3 reactors that will start the blade spinning at the very top. This is probably the longest section of uninterrupted gameplay in this game so far. It's like 20 to 30 minutes long of going around and doing puzzles and throwing these little crystal guys into these reactor spots. Now, this puzzle is actually kind of cool. I like this type of puzzle. This is the greatest part of this game, is the puzzles, throwing the enemies around and doing stuff with the ring. These enemies charge themselves up by hitting other enemies. You pick them up, throw them into the enemy, and they will charge up to another charge level. There are 2 things you can do. Throw them into the same colors of reactor, or throw them into the same color of bomb. The bombs are blocking your way, and the only way to break them is to have this enemy charged between 1 of 3 charges, a red, yellow, and blue charge. Depending on how many enemies you hit and absorb with them, you'll be able to throw them at those bombs. Anytime they hit another enemy, they will come back to you automatically, and that's what you rely on. If you double jump and send them straight down, if they hit the ground, they'll disappear. But if they hit another enemy, they'll come back to you. So you need to time your double jumps to get to the spot you need to go, and then it will come back to you where you can and then use it again. There are many types of these puzzles and they're fantastic. I love doing these little things. Anyway, it takes about half an hour to activate all 3 of these blades, where we finally get this arc up and running and go to Mira Mira. We reach the snow-covered mountains of Mira Mira, and the first thing we do is board our way down the mountains, which is really fun. The boarding sections, like I said, are just fun. There isn't anything super special, but we do board into the screen and across 2D style, and we get to do a lot of jumping and dodging of things, using enemies to double jump out of the way of things. It's really fun. Until eventually we make it to the kingdom of Mira Mira, where the castle actually allows us to come in, because everyone there is nostalgia sick. I mean, seriously, they are stuck in the past. They use these mirrors, like Mira Mira, to see all the things they used to do, and they just stay inside all day, reliving the old days, even though it's not actually the same. Nostalgia is a little bit more complex than that. You can't just relive the past. That's why playing these PS2 games is so interesting. I get to make new memories. Anyway, they're like, yeah, we don't know where the bell is, man, so we're just gonna sit here and relive the old days. So we head into their very weird looking upside down castle, which allows us to go on the ceiling and on the floor, where we have to solve puzzles on the ceiling and the floor to go through. There's one cool puzzle that takes a second to figure out how to solve. It's got 4 doors, and you can only access 2 doors at a time by standing in the middle and switching which doors you have access to. You've got to find the enemies inside and use them in a certain order so that you can activate everything and get through the last door. None of the puzzles in this game are too hard for anyone to figure out, but they are fun, satisfying puzzles all over the place. They're just hard enough to make you think a few times, but they're easy enough to have fun and just continuously do over and over and feel good about finishing. Before we fight the next boss, Lolo has a crisis and she does not think she's good enough to be able to do any of this. So obviously in Mira Mira, she's been looking back at the past like these guys have, and it's a dangerous game too. Nostalgia is great to have and cool to remember all the things from the past, but she's really not able to handle this. So we give her a pep talk a couple times, and then we finally fight the boarding boss. One of the best bosses in the game, honestly. It's just so much fun. The very first phase of the battle is us trying to dodge things and use these rotating squares to speed up ahead and smash into the boss. Every time you do it, it loses a little health. And finally, you get to the end of the first phase, where Lolo gets pep talked into finally using the ring again. So we can use the ring to grab enemies and throw them at the newly hatched boss. It was an egg at first, and now it's hatched into this thing, and we can pick up enemies that it throws at us and throw them back at him until we finally destroy him. It's just a fun sequence. This boss is just so much fun. The boarding is fun. I don't know. The game does a great job with fighting and puzzles and enemies and bosses, but sadly we have to end the boss fight, and we find the tree of indecision, and it lets us ring the bell of indecision. And he does say that indecision is a part of everyday life. Obviously these kingdoms kind of mirror real life feelings, and it's starting to feel like we're called the Dream Traveler. This whole place might be a dream, connecting thoughts of real people and the way that we treat things, and you know, those guys are all stuck in nostalgia, and there's the Kingdom of Tranquility, and then there's Joyland. There's a lot of stuff that mirrors the real world here. We head back to Baguji to ask him for advice on what to do now that we have 3 of the elements. We still need the last one, and as far as we know, Leorna, the Sky Pirate, has it. So we hand him the other 3 elements and are like, hey, what do we do with them? Well, it's not Baguji, it's Leorna in Baguji's outfit, tricking us. So she's just taken the other 3 elements, now she has all 4. She puts them together, disappears, and suddenly chaos begins. We've now got to make it back to the High Priestess to ask for advice on what to do next. So we go through a few more of the levels that we went through before. However, the air is now toxic, and the only way to breathe is to go near the statues that have been lining the way through to the High Priestess. So we have to go do some puzzles, get out of the air quick enough to breathe safely, and then go to the next area. There's now a small bar at the top of the screen that shows how much air we have left, and that's pretty much it. We just go through solving puzzles and trying not to breathe the toxic air. We make it to the High Priestess, and she reveals that Leorna was a priestess herself a long time ago, or not that long ago, and her quest for power could not be satiated, so she decided she was going to get her own power, and that's what she did. She decided to make her own ring and use her own powers on the ring to gather the elements of the bells. However, she had just started when the Dream Traveler, me, showed up, so she decided it was time to go ahead and ring the bells and get this thing going. But she let us do it and then tricked us, got all the elements, and now she's trying to ring the 5th bell, which is what actually happens at the very end. She decides to ring that 5th bell and we have to go try and stop her, and so we go through a couple levels that we went through before, but we don't make it there in time. She rings the 5th bell, and Lolo says, if there's a 5th bell, isn't there a 5th kingdom? Well, after Leorna rings the 5th bell, the arc that we were using to go around to the kingdom suddenly turns into this special look bird, and Leorna takes it to the sea, where the sea dries up and suddenly a 5th kingdom appears. Klonoa grabs a surfboard and surfs down all of these different ancient pathways that were underneath the ocean, and it's really cool, admittedly. These levels are just fun. You see all these bones down beneath where the ocean was, and animals animals and just cool background elements. And we finally get to Leorna and we do a boss fight to take the elements back. Now this boss fight's pretty cool. She turns into this big bug looking thing and she's on top of this ring, which pretty much all boss battles except for the boarding ones are on a ring. At first we smack the boss a few times until she goes underneath the ring and crawls underneath it, where we have to then do a double jump and send an enemy down into specific parts of the ring to smack her down. Then when she jumps back up, we get a specific enemy that allows us to shoot directly up into the air, and she jumps very high and lands on the ground. We gotta hit her stomach from underneath. This is just a fun boss fight. Leorna is really upset, but she realizes she was wrong this whole time. She was neither a savior nor was she powerful, and she gives us everything and says we can still close the path to the kingdom of sorrow. Oddly enough, this kingdom was being hidden, most likely because sorrow is not a good emotion to have, I guess. I don't know why it's being hidden. It shouldn't be, but you know what? That's what we're doing. So we go through another set of levels with some very devious puzzles. They're really good. They just did a good job with puzzles in this, with how little you actually have to work with. So bravo team, bravo. And we finally make it to another boarding section, and we are in this eternal night type area where we're boarding down very thin paths, jumping over everything we can imagine. This is definitely a difficult boarding section, and I think it's a stellar one too. Just the visuals alone make it feel very isolated. I mean, this is the kingdom of sorrow and it has been isolated, so you feel the same way. It feels like you're just boarding straight into the abyss. We make it to the king of sorrow himself, and this is the person who has pulled us into the dream world in the first place, the one at the very beginning who has asked us to help him this entire time. We see Baguji's clothes in the background. Obviously he was dressed up as Baguji, trying to help us get to him so that we can atone for our sins of some sort. Really the whole idea is that this is the dream world and it represents a lot of things about one person, Lunatea, and Lunatea's veil has been lifted, and that's why we could see the fifth bell, the bell of sorrow, an emotion that wants to be hidden because obviously, you know, you don't want to be sad, but it's an important emotion to have. So the king thinks that we need to atone for the sins of this dream world, and here we are to help him, or to really just die. But we are going to stop the king of sorrow, and to do that, the first section we go through is another difficult boarding section where we have to dodge spikes and smack into these things to hit the boss. And it's just the first part of the boss fight, don't worry. Oddly, the king of sorrow's boss fight is really not that difficult. He sits in the middle of the ring under a bubble that is protected by these lasers shooting around in circles. It also has these arcing lasers equipped to two enemy looking things you can pick up with the ring. If you get behind them, which it looks like it's a very smooth spot behind the enemy, if you grab it, you can then smack the lasers as they turn around this big sphere. After you hit them enough, you can just throw them into the middle and hit the king of sorrow himself. Once you figure out what to do, it's very simple. You do it twice and he's dead. It was a lot easier than I thought it would be. In the end, the king of sorrow had lost his way, but Klonoa helps connect all the kingdoms and return everything back to normal so that everyone can live peacefully in this dream world. I guess it's really just the dream of Lunatea, so maybe she will be back to normal out in the real world. Because at the end, Lolo decides to give up being a priestess, Leorna lives and goes off to do whatever she's gonna do, and we just kind of hug Lolo and that's it. We walk out of the dream world, and apparently we wake up kind of at our bedside looking at the ring on our bed table, and I've named my character Buttfuck. I'm so sorry. This is sorry everyone, but yeah, that's it. That is the end of the game. We go into the dream of Lunatea, we lift Lunatea's veil, and we make her realize that maybe emotions aren't so scary after all. You gotta feel them, man. So that's it. Game number 74 is complete. Klonoa was a great game. It was not in my top 5 or even top 10, but it is a very solid platformer. It's kind of expensive physical. It was about $60, but if you can play it, it's still a very fun time. It took me about 6 to 7 hours to beat it. There are a lot of things you can do by collecting the bells and by collecting the dreamstones and unlocking them for this little place in Joyland, so you can play mini games and look at your scrapbook. So there's a lot more stuff I could do, but that's about it for me. I beat the game, we saw credits. Thank you so much everyone who watched this video all the way through. Thank you everyone in the stream who came to watch, and thank you to all the Patreon, YouTube, and Twitch memberships that are out there helping the channel get more games to play so that we can continue on this epic quest of insanity. And you know, I don't know if I'm gonna beat it, but we'll keep going. So thank you so much. I'll be back for the next video. Later.